Hello and welcome back to the shed. In today's video I wanted to talk about some of the different options available for sharpening in terms of choosing sharpening stones and where you can begin in terms of the price points from cheapest to most expensive. When it comes to sandpaper, you can have something as basic as what I've got here, which is just some standard wet and dry sandpaper with some adhesive spray on the back, sticking it down onto a piece of melamine. Now just bear in mind, only put the adhesive on the paper side and not on the other side, otherwise you're going to struggle to get these back off when they wear out. The whole idea between this is that the sandpaper is relatively cheap when you're beginning out, and you can just put it on a flat substrate. Melamine does work. Other things you can use are granite slabs that are guaranteed to be flat. You can use granite tiles, and you'll use a straight edge at the store for that one, or some float glass. Whatever you use as the substrate, it doesn't really matter. You're still just sticking your sandpaper onto it. Now I've got 80/20 and 240 grit here, 600 grit on the back here, and some 360. So you can actually just have a range of small squares for sharpening. And it's just like anything else, a little bit of water on here and then rubbing back and forwards like that, and you're good to go. Wet and dry sandpaper is best for this because you can obviously put water or some alcohol on there and it doesn't break it down straight away. And it's just going to mean that the swath moves around a little bit more, and it's going to be that little bit easier for you to work with. At the bottom end of your stone range are oil stones such as this one, this combination one like this, where it's finer on one side and rougher on the other. Now the beauty of these is that they're very, very cheap, and I will leave some links below to everything that I showed you in this video. So you essentially, with these, is put a little bit of oil on it like this, since it's an oil stone, bring them in like this, and sharpen straight on top of them. Now the advantage of oil stones are that they are relatively cheap. They're much cheaper than a lot of your other water stones. You can pick them up at your local hardware store. They are a relatively hard stone. These are what were used back in the day by most craftsmen. If they weren't using natural stones, they were using a man-made oil stone, such as one of these combination ones, or you can get individual grits, just like in your water stones. Just one other note in terms of flattening. I know I said that the oil stones are hard and they barely need flattening, but they can go out of flat eventually, and you will need to use some lubricant, something like kerosene or something like that, to clean them regularly if they do clog up, because they can clog up with all that oil there. And you can also flatten them with a piece of sandpaper on a flat surface. The main downfall of the oil stone is that it cuts quite slow compared to your diamond stones and your water stones. So if that's an option for you, you can go ahead, pick one of these up, and it will do the job if you're on a budget. It just might take you a little bit longer to get that sharpening done. First of all, I'm going to look at the cheaper water stones, such as the King's ones that I've got right here. Now these King's water stones that you see right here are, as it says, a water stone. These style are ones that you keep submerged all the time, and if you check with the manufacturer, they'll tell you which stones you want to keep submerged all the time and which ones it says will make them go soft and lose their bonds if you keep them soaked the whole time. Some of them, as you go up through to the more expensive ones, you just soak for 10-15 minutes before you use them, and then you dry them out when you're done, and you repeat that process every time you go to use them. Just like all other water stones, you keep these ones spritzed, you keep them wet, come in, sharpen them like this, and they work quite well. Now the only disadvantage to these is that you're using water here, so water can make a bit of a mess on your wooden bench, and that's why a sharpening station board or something like that is generally used. And I'll leave a link to the one that I just made so you can check that out if you're interested. These water stones, they cut fast. You can get a variety of grits, right from quite coarse. I believe these King's ones started around the 100 or 120 grit and go all the way up to 5,000 or 10,000, like most water stones. The advantage of these cheaper water stones is that they're very cheap. They do sometimes get a little bit soft, even though you're soaking them all the time and they're meant for that. They do sometimes get soft and chip, and I have had a little bit of chipping occur in the past on some of these stones here. So you just got to be a little bit careful with them. These cheaper ones tend to be a little bit softer than the more expensive ones, so you regularly have to flatten them. And for flatten them, I do recommend one diamond plate for that. So now we're going to move on to some more expensive water stones, and these are the Cerex ones, if you see here. Now these ones, they have a little stone here that you can swath up on the surface to actually get some grit on the surface before you sharpen. I haven't actually used these stones yet, and these ones come in these nice little carry cases with rubberized feet and this plastic plate here. However, these particular water stones are ones that you just soak 10 to 15 minutes before you use them and then let them dry out. Because if you don't, the bonds that hold apparently the grit together can break down, and what also just holds these plastic bits onto the bottom, that adhesive can break down. The advantage of these ones being more expensive is that they do have a nice little carry case, so you don't need a separate holder, which does in some cases make it cheaper. And these ones that I've read online tend to be a little bit harder than some of your other water stones. So you need to flatten it less often and you can get away with more sharpening. And the other thing is, these more expensive ones tend to cut a little bit faster than the very cheapest ones. There are some other quite expensive water sharpening stones, and they're just a splash and go stone. I don't have any of them here. I'll try and put a photo up here so you can see. The beauty of those particular stones are that they're quite a hard stone. You just spritz them on the surface. They're very hard, even compared to something like these larger water stones. They have very little material, and they're Shapton glass stones, and they're just a splash and go. So you just spritz some water on and sharpen with them, and they're much, much harder than any other water stone. You still want to flatten them regularly. However, they don't go out of flat very, very quickly. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Japanese sharpening, and you can have a flat plate like this and use just an abrasive grit to sharpen. Now, that can be quite common. You can use these for flattening the back of your blades and chisels and things and sharpening them using this and using a water stone to put grit on there, or you can buy individual grits to actually do that process. Just a little thing I'd touch on, because some people like to do that, and it's very common in the Japanese sharpening and things to use a flat, in this case steel plate, or any other flat plate, and using the abrasives to actually sharpen. So you don't actually have to get stones. These ones are Atomo diamond stones, which are a pretty good price for what they are, and from what I've seen, these are actually very decent. These ones still have a steel plate. The advantage of these ones are that you can actually replace the top grit. You can actually buy them, and they'll have an adhesive backing that you can stick back on to replace them on these. You can also get glass bases for them and aluminium bases. Now, the advantage of the diamond stone is that they can take a lot of punishment. They're very hard, they never have to be flattened, they never really go out of flat. Some of the cheaper ones don't stay flat. However, they don't actually go out of flat if you get a decent one like Atoma or DMT or Easy Lap, something like that. And I'll leave some links down below for some of these if you're interested. Now, the other advantage of a diamond stone, especially a nice coarse gridded one, is that you can use it to flatten your other water stones. One thing to note with the diamond stones are that their grits are only really a recommendation, because as you use them, the diamonds break down and they get finer over time. So your coarsest stones will probably have to be replaced if you want to keep them quite coarse. However, having said that, the diamond stones do cut a lot faster, even as they go through the finer grits and they sort of get finer over time as you're using them. They do sharpen a lot faster than grits from other stones. So they are a lot more expensive, twice, 3 times the price of some of your cheaper water stones, maybe a little bit more than that of some of your oil stones. It's just a piece of leather stuck to a flat substrate that you can put honing compound on for different coarse levels, and obviously all of these stones go right up to quite coarse levels, especially your water stones. They can go right up to 10, 20, 30,000 grit, and I don't recommend any of you buying stones that go past maybe 1,000 grit, because honing compound on your strop is going to cover that for you anyway, so I don't see the purpose of wasting the money on those high grit stones. Some people are going to tell you different, so let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what you have to say about using these finer grits. So there you have it, folks. That's my overview and sort of like a video for beginners to deal with different sharpening stones and to clarify what the differences are between each of these different types of stones and even sandpaper, and obviously why there's a cost difference between some of them. Now in some cases that cost difference is just the brand name, but in other cases the stones do tend to cut faster and tend to be a little bit harder. So I do realize that some things that I haven't included here, I can only talk about what I've got and what I've used. So that's why I've talked about this. I know there's some different brands of water stones and maybe some oil stones, and there's some natural stones that I didn't talk about because they're tending to be outside the range of a lot of beginners. And obviously I did talk about sandpaper, and I do realize there are some other types of sandpaper like the Scary Sharp system, but I've not used it, so I'm not going to talk about that. I'll leave some links below to another YouTuber that did some great videos on the Scary Sharp system, so you can check that out as another option. Let me know below what you guys think and what you use in terms of your sharpening systems in your own workshops. And if you're interested in any of these sort of stones here, I'll leave some links down below to where you can see these stones and pick some of them up for yourself. So if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing down here and ticking that sub notification bell to get notifications of new episodes. And if you'd like to support me a little bit further, please consider checking me out on Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/AussieWoodshed. And if you'd like some more videos related to hand tool sharpening, I'll leave a couple of videos over here for you to check out. Bye for now.